I want to go through the stuff that I was originally planning on going through about neoliberalism or shall we call it Reaganomics? Or shall we call it Thatcheronomics? Or shall we call it conservative economics? Or shall we call it the death of democracy? Because the essence of neoliberalism is to say that everything is a commodity and everything should be controlled by marketplaces. And governments are nice, quaint, old things, but, you know, they're really there just to kind of, sort of like the NFL is there so that the teams can play. You know, the government is there so that the businesses can do what they do. But they can't regulate them very heavily. Well, the NFL actually regulates their teams quite heavily, but you know that the neoliberal theory would be bizarre applied to the NFL to begin with. But back to George Monbiot's piece. The headline is "Neoliberalism: The Ideology at the Root of All of Our Problems." It was published in The Guardian back in April 15th, actually, of this year, and he says, you know, most people fail to even realize that this is an ideology. They think it's actually a force of nature. And this was the goal of the people who invented neoliberalism, was to make people think that this was something new. This was, you know, von Hayek and von Mises, they saw this as a way of pushing back against the social welfare state. In fact, in 44, Hayek argued that government planning, in his book, The Road to Serfdom, he says, government planning will always lead to totalitarian control. You have to leave everything up to the markets. Now, what he missed was, if you leave everything up to the markets, you've got a new totalitarian, and that's the marketplace, those who control the marketplace, and they're not elected. But see, the first tenet of neoliberalism is that the individual is not the voter. The individual is not the head of government. It's not we, the people. The individual is instead a consumer. And even votes are a form of consumption. You're consuming all these ideas in the marketplace of ideas. And whoever makes the most cogent argument in that marketplace is going to win in the marketplace of ideas and thus win your vote. And if you think of it that way, you know, in this kind of neoliberal ideology thinking system, then the idea that, okay, so it's the marketplace of ideas. If you read Citizens United, you'll actually find this phrase, the marketplace of ideas. And you know, used by Kennedy, and it was the justification for saying, well, okay, you know, in fact, in the Citizens United case, they point out that the most well-informed actors, participants in the economy, are the businesses who are the largest businesses, who are at the center of the economy, or who are making the most profit from the economy. And because they're the most well-informed, if we were to reduce our ability to hear what they have to say to us to influence the marketplace of ideas, then we are harming our own First Amendment right to hear. It's not that the corporations have a First Amendment right to speak. That wasn't the logic that was used in Citizens United. The logic that was used was that you and I are losing our right to hear, which is the other half of the right to free speech. The First Amendment right to free speech implies a First Amendment right to hear somebody's speech. That by shutting down corporate speech, we are making the marketplace of ideas less vibrant and less full, and thus the decisions that we make will be less good. Are you following the logic here? I mean, this was the logic of the Citizens United decision, and it is all based in this neoliberal worldview, this Reaganomics worldview, this conservative economics worldview. Now, every European knows exactly what I'm talking about when I use the word neoliberalism. Most Americans don't. So we have a choice. We can educate Americans as to what the word neoliberalism means and point out that it has nothing to do with being liberal. I consider myself a liberal, a progressive. Bernie actually differentiates between the two and says he's not a liberal, he's a progressive. And I understand that distinction that he's making, but I'm fine calling myself either one. Neoliberal, neo, of course, is Greek for new. And, Hayek and von Mises were trying to present themselves and Milton Friedman as the new liberals. And by liberal, what they meant was kind of anything goes. Less government, more, quote, freedom. So Paul Verhaeghe wrote this book called What About Me that George Monbiot writes about. And in that book, Paul points out that one of the consequences of neoliberal economic and political ideology, at the political, the economic ideology is it's all the marketplace of ideas, and the market is always triumphant, and bigger is better because it produces efficiency, that Walmart is more efficient than 100,000 or 10,000 small mom and pop shops, and therefore Walmart is a good thing. And I would argue, no. I would argue inefficiency can be a good thing, too. And in fact, in biology, what's the most efficient organism? Or part of an organism? It's cancer. Cancer cells are the most efficient converters of energy into biomass that exist. And that's essentially neoliberal capitalism, is cancer. It's economic and political cancer. And it has spread, it spread across the United States in the 1980s in the form of Reaganism. It spread across the UK in 78 and throughout the 80s in the form of Thatcherism. And it has spread across Europe now. And frankly, it's spreading across South and Central America as well, being promoted by neoliberal billionaires by and large, ranging from libertarians to people who actually think that they're liberals, that they're doing good work, to people who are just overtly conservative, being spread by these billionaires, and a whole variety of programs like, school choice programs. We need to privatize our schools, or we need to privatize our air traffic system or our airports. We need to privatize our 9/11 services. We need to, it's like taking all the public, the commons, which is the reason why we created government in the first place, and saying, no, that really should be part of the marketplace. Even though there can be really no marketplace for these things. I mean, how many water lines can you bring into your house so that you can have a choice in the marketplace? Seriously, one. So it's a monopoly. I mean, it's just, but in any case, he points out, as Monbiot points out, he says, he says something else. He says neoliberalism became more strident. Hayek's view that governments should regulate competition to prevent monopolies from forming gave way. See, originally Hayek was saying he was in favor of things like the Sherman Antitrust Act to keep companies from getting so big that they eliminate their competitors, and thus they become super efficient, but everything else in the market around them becomes distorted. And Hayek was right about that. But as he kind of embraced this neoliberal ideology, he said, it's okay. We don't need the Sherman Antitrust Act or their equivalent in Europe. We don't need these things that keep companies small. Efficiency is good. Big companies will come to dominate the marketplace. That's what they should do. If they're offering a good product or service, people will buy it. And it's just that simple. Well, the reality is it's not that simple. But, this has been promoted by the American Enterprise Institute, the Heritage Foundation, the Cato Institute, the Institute of Economic Affairs, the Center for Policy Studies, Adam Smith Institute. These are the ones that Monbiot mentions in his book, among others. And then he says, stranger still, even as the ideology became crisper and the movement became more coherent. Now, he's talking about in the 1970s. The lost name was not replaced by any common alternative. At first, despite its lavish funding, neoliberalism remained at the margins. And then he talks about how the IMF, the World Bank, the Maastricht Treaty, and the WTO, these are all neoliberal institutions. They call themselves that. And usually they're imposed without democratic process on the rest of the world. Naomi Klein identified all this in Shock Doctrine, her book Shock Doctrine. And she points out that, Milton Friedman, after Pinochet's coup, after the Iraq War, after the Hurricane Katrina, Friedman described that as an opportunity to radically reform the educational system of New Orleans. Great. Hurricane Katrina wiped out all the schools. Let's let the marketplace replace them. Right? This was Donald Rumsfeld's thing in Iraq. When they shut down all the government agencies and said, okay, that's it. The marketplace can do things. And instead what happened is everything got looted and everything got burned down, and Donald Rumsfeld was reduced to saying, well, freedom's messy. Well, no, sorry. So neoliberalism works for the very wealthy. It works for the big corporations. It works for the banksters. It is helping those groups. It screws everybody else.
To watch more clips from our programs, hit the Watch More Videos button over here. And please be sure to hit the handy-dandy subscribe button so you'll always be up to date. Tag, you're it.